Think for a moment of somebody you love, somebody you care for. It might be your brother or your sister. It could be your child, your lover. Imagine that you go home this afternoon to the news that they've gone. You don't know where they are. They just haven't come home. Their phone is off. They're not on Facebook anymore. And you have no information about where they are or what's happened to them. Imagine your feelings, your fear, your wondering, maybe your guilt. Could you have done something to prevent this? Time goes by, and imagine 5 months later, or 5 years later, the joy of finding them again. They come home to you. Imagine your feeling then. They've been abused, they've been hurt, they've been exploited, but they're home and they're alive and now everything's okay. This experience of losing somebody, of not knowing where they've gone, and for some, the experience of finding them again, this is the real experience of millions of people in our world. It's the experience of human trafficking. I'm the co-founder of a charity here in Vietnam, Blue Dragon Children's Foundation, and we rescue young people in crisis. That includes people who've been trafficked, both for sex slavery and labour exploitation. And up until now, we've rescued 525 people from trafficking situations. Thank you. There's one particular case that really stands out to me as having had a momentous impact on me. A few years ago, we received a call for help from a Khmer ethnic community up in the northwestern mountains of Vietnam. 23 of their children were gone. Some kind strangers had come to town, and they promised jobs and training and education for this very poor community. And the parents, who didn't know much about the world, thought this could be the chance we've been looking for, a chance to break out of poverty. So they let their children go, and no sooner had they left their site than those traffickers, because they were human traffickers, turned off their mobile phones, and the parents had no more information about their children. Weeks and months passed. They didn't know if the children were still in Vietnam or if they were in another country. They didn't know if they were dead or alive. So we got involved and we found those children. They'd been sold to 2 garment factories in the south of Vietnam. And in both cases, they were locked into their factories in the upstairs section. The windows were boarded shut. The children couldn't see out, and no one could see that they were in there. No one knew that they were there. The children were working 18 hours a day. Every day. There was no day off. There was no holiday. They were beaten if they didn't work hard enough. They had no communication with their family. And the worst thing, they didn't know if they would ever see their family again. Imagine their joy when we found them and got them out, and imagine the joy of their families knowing that their children were coming home. It was a long journey home, 1,200 kilometres from where they were back to their home, and that final leg of the journey home was on a bus. As we set out, we bought a box of bottled water, put it on the bus, and all the kids jumped on this box, grabbed their bottle, and went back to their seat. But as I sat watching, I noticed that no one drank their water. I thought that was a little bit odd. Maybe they were all environmentalists. We drove through the night, and the next morning we reached this town where their parents had agreed they would come in and pick up their children. Mums and dads were there, and we rolled into town at 6 o'clock in the morning. The sun was just coming up. The parents were bleary-eyed. Some hadn't slept properly for weeks. The joy of that reunion, it was something beautiful. But as I watched, I looked at one particular child, the youngest of all of the children who'd been trafficked. This young boy, Vin. He was 11 years old. He was an only child, and his father was dead. So he was all that his mother had, and there was his mum, overjoyed to meet her son again. They hugged, they cried. And then I watched as Vin took a step back from his mother, and he reached into his bag and he pulled out a gift that he gave to her. It was his way of saying, "I'm okay, Mum. I'm a man. I can provide for you. I can even give you a gift." That gift was the bottle of water from the bus. This family was so poor that even a simple bottle of water was something special. And I watched as his mother held this bottle and looked at it and turned it over in her hands, and slowly it dawned on me, his mother didn't know how to open the bottle. She'd never opened a screw-top bottle. I wasn't the only person who saw this. There was a local policeman walking by. He was sort of on his way somewhere, and just going by, he stopped for a moment and he leaned in and he opened that bottle of water and he kept on walking. This was just a moment in our world where so much is going on all the time, just a brief moment in time. But for me, it was something profound. Because human trafficking is a dehumanizing experience. When you're trafficked and sold, you stop being a person. You become somebody's property. You're an object. You have no voice. You have no control over your future. You can't say what will happen to you tomorrow. But here in this moment, where trafficking had so impacted this child, this family, this community, I could see that humanity, the human spirit, had prevailed. Because this was a moment of vulnerability, of love and care. Even the policeman helping with the opening the bottle, the little boy giving the gift to his mother, the tears in her eyes. Human trafficking had not beaten the human spirit. Now, we live in a world where human trafficking is a significant problem. Estimates are that there are between 20 and 30 million people right now who've been trafficked and sold. The whole population of Australia is 23 million people. Imagine a whole country gone, missing, and you don't know where they are. New York State has about 20 million people. Imagine all of New York gone. That's the scale that we're talking about. And when I talk about that scale and then tell you we've rescued 525 people, it's easy to feel really overwhelmed. What chance do we even have? Is there anything we can do about this problem? But one thing I've learned, and I've deeply come to believe, is that the fight against human trafficking is the right fight for us. It is fundamentally right to look for people who've been trafficked and get them home. In and of itself, it is worth doing because these human lives are so important. I got involved in human trafficking about 10 years ago, quite by accident. I was sitting in a restaurant in Ho Chi Minh City. It was late afternoon. I was sitting out the front and I noticed a child, a young boy, walking up and down the street selling flowers. I noticed that every time he sold a flower, he would then go and give the money to these two women who were sitting at the end of the street. I pretty quickly worked out this is a boy who'd been trafficked. So I got talking to him and I learned that his name was Knox. He was 13 years old and he was from central Vietnam. And when I asked him, "Do you want to go home?" it was a very definite yes. Now at that time, Blue Dragon was a very small organisation. We'd never done anything with human trafficking before, but I thought, look, maybe I can help. Maybe there's something I can do. It's a bit of a long story, but I got him home. He was able to get away from the traffickers and he returned to his home. So then I wanted to know more. I wanted to know, where did this child come from? What happened to him? So my staff and I went to his village and what we saw shocked us. That's Knox in the red shirt, his brother and sister, and that's their home behind them. Now, nobody in Knox's family, not his mother or father, brother or sister, no one had been to school. No one was literate. No one could hold a pen and write their name. And they lived in that tin shack in a typhoon zone, and every time the typhoon came in, which was at least 3 times a year, their home would just blow away. And when the typhoon had passed, they'd pick it up and they'd put it back together. So when some traffickers came to town and offered them education, opportunities for vocational training, they thought they'd won the lottery, and they let Knox go, and they were deceived. He was sold. What I also learned was that it wasn't only Knox. There were countless children, dozens of children from this area that had been trafficked, and some were selling flowers in Ho Chi Minh City. Some, like the little boy Vin, were in these garment factories, working through the night, sitting on the floor, cutting out cloth. This was a huge problem. And so we decided we would start our very first rescue operations, where we just went and we looked for children who'd been trafficked, and with permission from their families, we brought them home. And then we helped them to go on living in their community, returning to school. It was about 2 years after we started this that we received our first call for help from China, where a Vietnamese girl who we knew had gone missing, and she'd been trafficked and sold against her will to a brothel in China. She didn't know where she was. So we went to look for her, and we found her, and in the process we were able to set her free, along with 5 other Vietnamese girls. They came back to Vietnam. This was where our work all started from. Now, I've been doing this for 10 years. You would hope I've learned some things along the way, and I can tell you, I can sum it all up as 2 lessons, 2 things that we've learned. Number 1, people who are trafficked are people like you and me. We like to think that we wouldn't get trafficked because we're smart, or we're rich, or we're careful, or we're male. We've rescued males and females, boys and girls, men and women, married people, single mothers. We've rescued a 7-year-old girl. We've rescued a 40-year-old. We've rescued university students. We rescued a journalist. We rescued a businesswoman who went to China looking to source material for her business. There's no one person or no one type of person who can say, wouldn't happen to me, wouldn't happen in my family. We can all be touched by this crime. And the second thing that I've learned, human traffickers come in all shapes and sizes. You know, we watch the movies and we think that they're men in dark suits wearing sunglasses. In fact, we've come across a trafficker who was a grade 11 schoolgirl, and she sold somebody in her class. We've come across a trafficker who was an elderly woman selling tea outside a pagoda. There have been Xe-om drivers, single men, the owners of internet cafes, tour guides. You might pass somebody on the street on the way home, and they're a human trafficker, and you would have no idea. Now, I'm talking about this huge scale of this problem. I'm saying it's so insidious. It could be here in this room, it could be in your street, and we wouldn't even know. And it brings us back to the question, can we really fight against this? Can we really succeed? For all the energy that we have to put into this, is it worth it? So let me tell you the good news. Remember little Vin, the boy with the water bottle? When you go up to his community now, there aren't children from there being trafficked anymore. Traffickers don't stand a chance in that Khmer community these days because the families know. They know what these kind strangers are really up to. And when you go to the south of Vietnam, back to those garment factories, you won't see, as you once did, factory after factory with children labouring away. It doesn't happen. Now, I'm not saying that the problem is finished, that it's been eliminated, but it used to be normal, and now it's unusual to see that. That's progress, right? On a much bigger scale, we've got the United States government every year coming out with its Trafficking in Persons report. That report ranks countries according to how well they're fighting trafficking. That report spurs countries on to changing, to improving. That's massive. Over in England, you've got the appointment of an anti-slavery commissioner. You've got organisations like Trust Women, which award companies for rooting out slavery from their supply chain. These are big picture developments that have happened in the last decade, and some are very recent, that all add up to a big picture of a world that doesn't accept human trafficking. But I said earlier that I believe it's just fundamentally right to fight against human trafficking, that it's just the right thing to do. My reasoning is not about these great successes, as great as they are. I want to show you why I believe fighting against human trafficking is the right thing to do. You see this young man in the black jacket sitting at the table? Do you recognize him? Because you've seen him before. That's Knox. After we rescued Knox, he went to school. He learned to read and write. He got a job as a chef. He got married and they had a child. And one day Knox came to me and he said, "You rescued me when I was in crisis. Now I want to help other people who are just like me." Knox works for Blue Dragon Children's Foundation now. And in this photograph, he's involved in what we call a registration campaign. When we found him, he didn't have a birth certificate. No one in his family legally existed. Now he's sitting there helping other people get their birth certificates. We've done this for 8,000 people, and here's Knox doing this for a few hundred more. This 13-year-old boy who had nothing, he's now a proud young man who has devoted his life to helping others. When you rescue somebody from human trafficking, the impact on their life, on their family, on their community, it is a world-changing experience. The fight against human trafficking may well feel like it's an overwhelming battle that we can't win, a losing battle. But it is a fight that we, as a global community, can win, one life at a time. Thank you.